While bathing my son, I noticed he had been circumcised, which felt off, so I quickly measured his height, and he was shorter than before. In that moment, I finally realized he wasn't my son at all, but the boy refused to admit it.
Good night, Mommy.
Stop saying that! I'm not your mother! I want my son back!
I rushed to the sheriff thinking they'd made a mistake, but the sheriff insisted this was my son and called in an expert to convince me. The expert's reasoning was absurd and he suggested I was mentally unstable, so I could only glare at him with resentment. After the expert left, I vented my emotions wildly, scaring the boy. Once I calmed down, I seriously thought about how to solve this. Suddenly, I had an idea, get the boy to admit it himself, but no matter how much I pleaded, he wouldn't respond, so I left disappointed. I didn't give up and took him to school. The boy's background was unclear, and sure enough, he couldn't name his teacher. The teacher calmly told him to take a seat, and he randomly picked an empty chair, causing the classmates to burst into laughter. The teacher immediately stopped them and told him he was in the wrong seat. The boy switched seats, but the teacher's test was already over. The teacher not only agreed to write a statement but also offered to testify in court, and I was very grateful. Then I took him to the dentist who had treated my son's cavities before, and quickly noticed something was off, giving me a written statement. I found a reporter and explained everything publicly. The news spread quickly, and I was called into the police station. But the sheriff didn't want to admit fault, refused to search for my son, and called in a doctor from a mental hospital.
Mrs. Collins, you still insist that the boy out there is not your son?
Yes, I do.
Please don't struggle.
What?
You'll only hurt yourself.
I was diagnosed with delusional disorder and taken to the mental hospital. My legs trembled with fear as the doctors had to support me just to complete the admission. I tried to defend myself, but the doctors wouldn't listen. They roughly showered me first, then started a full examination. The hospital reeked of a foul smell, and behind every iron door were strange patients locked up. Once locked in my room, I was cut off from contact, only getting some air during meals, but I had no appetite. A fellow patient sat next to me and advised me to eat properly and not put up a futile fight. This place was a private prison for the police, and if you offended them, you'd be locked in here and tortured. Seeing their miserable state, I fell into despair. When facing the doctors, I deliberately acted obedient, but they still wanted to torment me. Then a doctor suddenly pulled out a document, saying if I admitted the police hadn't made a mistake, I could leave. I was furious and refused to sign. The doctor declared me insane and ordered the guards to arrest me. I was taken to the main hall where the doctors teamed up to restrain me, pinching my nose to force me to swallow medicine. The fellow patient rushed to help but was pulled away. She was taken to the shock room and subjected to agonizing torture while I could only watch helplessly. I secretly visited her later, and she encouraged me to keep fighting, but we were soon discovered by a nurse. In the afternoon during routine doctor's rounds, they kept me back. To get me to sign quickly, they wanted to use electroshock to coerce me, but I wasn't afraid and mocked him with contempt, which drove the doctor into a rage. He immediately had me taken to the shock room, tied me down, and my mouth was gagged. Just as the nurse was about to turn on the voltage, several men burst in, demanding my release and holding up a newspaper. I was rescued, but the doctor still tried to persuade me, which I coldly refused. I was released just like that. I thought the nightmare was over, but the police had already found my son's body and reported it.